Hey guys, so welcome to this little presentation. Just going over a concept I like to explain to my lifters that not all blocks are created equal. So I'm going to keep it brief and kind of go through some of the concepts I want to explain essentially. So what type of blocks do we have? So in my own coaching system, I kind of have two types of blocks, but within them they have slightly different focuses, but obviously they're intermingled together. So we have expression blocks, we have like building blocks. And a building block is essentially where we're working towards maybe better work capacity, we're maybe building general fitness qualities, we're not chasing that top end as much, we're focused on getting adaptation and increasing fatigue uh, in order to get better and to progress. So when we go through expression blocks, I kind of view these like you're in the final stages of your peaking, or you're doing some sort of a test block where you're trying to determine whether your strategy actually worked or not. So with an expression block, we're looking at like when is it used? So it's used when we're hitting all-time PRs, or we're trying to hit some big rep PRs, or we're trying to test whether our strategy over the last few blocks has led to progress, right? So it's to express strength. So how does it work? Well, typically we'll do a lot of pre-planned load progressions, and this can happen during building blocks as well, but typically we'll have a quote unquote pipeline for these expression blocks where if we start really low or at an appropriate load to start the block, we finish higher. So maybe, for example, if you're aiming to squat a 300 kilo single on squat, you might start with weeks 1 to 4, the goal being an RP9 at 300, where you start with 250, 250, 270, 285, 300. I bet the first 2 weeks of your training, the 250 to 270, you're probably not getting tons of stimulus. And it's probably nothing crazy for training, but it's allowing you to control for fatigue and really show fitness and show your ability to express strength. So if we are to run a building block and maybe we started with like 265 kilos, you may only finish at maybe a 290 single instead. That doesn't mean that 290 is your capabilities. It might be there's a lot of fatigue accumulation during that block, which kind of dampers on it. So the goal of an expression block is to think of it in terms of actually you're trying to express strength. We're trying to see if a strategy has worked. So think of it kind of like a testing block to see where you're at, to see if the strategies are working. Um, for a build block, let's say there's different ways to view a build block, and I'll explain this in everyone's programs as they go through things. Some build blocks, it's about chasing work capacity. So sometimes lifting may require you to hit a certain amount of volume and a certain amount of intensity or a mix to make progress. If we can't hit those landmarks with a recovery, whether we're coming from an injury or we're literally just like our work capacity just really tanked and got low, in order to make progress, we need to be able to handle more stimulus. Then we need to focus on building work capacity. This may lead to having 1 to 2 to 3 blocks where we don't chase these big week 4 PRs. We don't chase the end of block like send. We focus on building each block one at a time, stacking them together, leading to potentially an expression block, like I like to say. So we want to take the focus away from chasing PRs and shift that focus towards being able to fully recover from the work that we're doing and be able to do the work required to actually make progress. And then another form of a build block could be purposely kind of pushing fatigue to create adaptation. Maybe we want to start week ones at a higher threshold, and that will lead to fatigue, but we'll get 4 good quality training weeks versus having the pipeline approach where we're looking for expression. When we want to build strength, we're going to have to accumulate some fatigue. So these blocks will typically foster higher fatigue with a lower top end. Obviously, over the course of the block, you do want to feel better and get better. But as we progress through our lifting careers, we're going to need more blocks strung together to lead to some form of a PR. Like it could take 3 to 4 to 5 blocks leading into either a competition or a testing period to actually show progress. And I think a lot of lifters will see each block as an opportunity to hit a PR. And I think when you're early in your phase, that's very easy. But as you progress through training, you can't really just PR block to block right out of a comp or every single block of your training cycle. Like you're probably looking at every 3rd to 4th block, you're looking at hitting some sort of maybe PR, depending on your current situation. So traditionally with these build blocks, we focus on hitting traditionally more static progressions. So maybe average load is higher at the start of the block, and we finish with a lower load relative to something like an expression block. And then obviously we'll have a lower top end expression, but that expression is masked by the amount of work we've been doing. So example, we have a top set, we'll go RP 6, 7, 7, 8. You're probably going to have smaller week to week jumps with greater fatigue accumulation. But if you compare that to an expression block, we have these big jumps week to week. You'll notice the average load taken for those build blocks might equate an expression block, but instead we're able to accumulate some good quality work, right? Versus again, an expression block, we're looking at hitting that big magic week 4 that's going to show us that we've made progress. But the build blocks is what allows us to actually get stronger. Or we might do on secondary days like a static RP. So RP7 every single week and just see if we can just chip away, chip away, chip away, but we'll probably accumulate a good amount of like fatigue. So when it comes to sequencing these blocks, I view it in terms of like we have like macrocycle, which is multiple blocks together. And then we have our mesocycle, which is like one block of training, and then our microcycle, which is a string together of weeks of training. You'll see this in your dashboard typically, but the goal is I, for example, this athlete, we do 3 build blocks into an expression block. So the idea is we come up with a strategy, we figure out a bottleneck. What is the lifter missing? They're missing this component, maybe this, maybe their triceps are weak, or maybe out of the squat working on some positional stuff, or we're just trying to build up some more capacity in the first maybe 2, 3 blocks. After those 2, 3 blocks, we then want to showcase, did this strategy actually lead to progression? And then we'll put out an expression block. So the goal is to string together multiple blocks and work on these weaknesses, build strength. When we want to test whether the program is working, we do some form of an expression block where we start at a lower RP and finish at a higher RP, where previous blocks, to see what previous blocks did to lead to progress. So essentially it's like you build some momentum, build some momentum, build some momentum. When we feel like the momentum is really being built and we feel like we're maybe chipping away at some little PRs, maybe in like block 3, it's like, okay, maybe it's time to show that expression. So then what we do is we quote unquote pipeline the block and we see what type of expression we're seeing. Or in a competition prep, maybe you're competing on week 4 of this macro cycle. The first 3 blocks, it's like, let's accumulate fatigue, let's accumulate good quality work that's going to lead to strength progress, but it might be masked by fatigue. And then ideally, by the time you get to this block, things show up better because we've reduced the fatigue. We let you train into the comp. You gain momentum. We do bigger jumps week to week. That's kind of the overall goal with our training. So as you're doing training with me or with your coach, understand these differences, that not every block is created equal. Some of them will be a stepping stone to the next one, and then some of them will be that big IG, week 4 send. But understanding the difference and knowing what we're trying to work on is very paramount to you executing the program to your best ability. Because again, if you're trying to fail your week 4s every single block and develop no momentum, then you're going to reach this expression block and be like, I have nothing to express. I've just expressed my strength every single block and I'm kind of fried. So yeah, other than that, let me know if this makes sense. And then to close it off, why is it important to do block sequencing? Well, we learn the goals of each block. So by learning the goals of each block, we can execute the block to the best of our abilities. Not every block is about chasing a PR, right? Some blocks is about chasing a bottleneck, chasing a weakness, something to work on, whether it's work capacity, whatever weak point we're working on. Some blocks will require a different focus. Maybe they're more technique based. Obviously, you'll do technique all the time, but maybe they're focused on variations or certain things. And then understand that each block is meant to build upon the previous one, right? It's about stringing together quality training blocks that leads to that big expression block. So let me know if this makes sense. If you enjoy this type of content, obviously like reach out, ask me questions, any clarifying stuff, happy to clarify, but just wanted to kind of go over that and make sure that this makes sense.